Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar tonight. You are in for a special treat because this is a 2-hour webinar both on 101 and 201 levels of using Noteflight Learn. All of this is being recorded, obviously live, and tonight we're gonna go into sections. So what you'll see is we are live recording multiple sections of all the different ways you can use Noteflight Learn, from SoundCheck to setting up sites, and you will receive a recording of all of these sections, both the entire webinar as well as little individual pieces throughout the tomorrow. So we have two amazing team members of Noteflight here, Amber and Danielle. They are in the chat. As we're going tonight, you're welcome to ask any questions you want. Let's use the chat for those questions, and Amber and Danielle will totally be able to help you at any time. I will be ignoring the chat, and I will be presenting all sorts of great stuff with Noteflight Learn. Also note that we will take a break between. I know some other folks are planning on coming on in for the 201 side, and so we'll take a little 5-minute break in the middle so everyone can relax. If you're in it for the long haul, I'm excited about that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to talk about is setting up your Noteflight Learn site. We get a lot of questions from folks on how do I get started? Do I use Google Classroom integration? Do I use LTI, which is Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, and sites, and do I use a standalone site? So I'm going to go through and briefly demonstrate how the different site setups work. And we'll start with Google Classroom setup. So setting up your Noteflight Learn site with Google Classroom. When you go to set up a Noteflight Learn site, you're setting up a private site for you and your students. When you integrate with Google, you are directly connecting to your Google Classroom, and Noteflight is a premier Google education partner and a verified application in Google. So all the information has been verified by Google to be safe, and we are protecting student data. Noteflight actually does not see the student logins or passwords at all. They're verified by Google and passed to Noteflight, and then Noteflight is syncing with your classes and your assignments, and I'll show you all that as we progress. So how do you get started setting up a site? Well, when you create a Noteflight Learn site, you get 3 options. So the first we're going to talk about is integrate with Google Classroom. Now, when integrated with Google Classroom, the first thing it will ask you to do is connect to a Google class. Now, I've already connected to my Google user, which is Teacher 5. I'm logged in as Teacher 5, so Noteflight's connected. So here, once you go through that connection step, you'll set up a site name. And so I'm just going to set up Teacher 5 demo site. Now, this is a similar process for all setups, and we'll go from here. This is where you'll accept Noteflight Learn terms of service and policy, and you can always make this site public. This does not mean your data is public. This means that you could share a link with parents, and anything that's shared to the public site can be viewable by parents, but they will have no access to any other student data or anything else, just the musical score. I like to check this because you'll find that you want to share information with others. So now we'll add this site, and you'll go right to it. Now, you've created your own URL now, and of course I called mine Teacher 5 demo site. Now, the next thing you'll do is it'll take you right to add students. Now, with Google, you can manage or sync your classes. So at this point, you can manage classes, and it will connect to your Google Classroom and pull in all of your classes. So here's my test Google Classroom person, and I have some classes here. And notice that Noteflight has pulled all of these in. So I can say, okay, I would like to sync my 5th grade A and B, my 3rd grade level B, any classes you want, and you don't have to sync all of them, you can choose. And then you can go ahead and update. Now notice it's counting. So this syncs the class and also creates user accounts for every single student in those classes. So I'll just go ahead and hit update. It says that 197 are going to be added. And now Noteflight is of course talking to Google to get this set up. Now, as we go along tonight, I'm going to point out where everything is in our Help Center. So when you go to support.noteflight.com, and I'll start from the beginning, you'll have Noteflight Learn. Everything we're showing is in a Help Center article. And in fact, you might be actually watching this video that's now in these articles. So there's a Google Classroom section that has all of the the maintenance and setup and administrative pieces of the site. So right now I'm going through the site setup and integration steps. And notice Google has synced and it's counted all your members. So it's confirming how many students you have in each class. Noteflight only counts students once. So you have a student in 2 different classes, it only counts as 1 seat. And you hit OK, and Noteflight is now syncing everything with Google. At this point, when this is done, any student that's in those classes can simply go to this site, teacher5demosite.gc.noteflight.com, this URL, and they can log in with Google. And whatever their Google username and password is they use for your school, they'll log right in. The other thing to note is that if you make any changes in students, right, I'll let this go ahead and process and I'll show you some other, it's updating right now, but you see these options to invite teachers or sync classes. If you make any change in your Google Classroom, right, if you add a student or remove a student or anything like that, Noteflight is not going to automatically pull that in. And the reason for that is strictly because we don't want to make a sudden change to your site without your permission, right? You may remove a student for your Google Classroom, or your admin may roster students, but they still, want access to that masterpiece Noteflight score that they made. And of course, we don't want to just take that away. So that user will still have an account until you sync, and then Noteflight will call Google and be like, "Hey, Google," and then Google will say, "Hey, here's the updates," and it will all go through. And that process happens automatically, and that's the sync option, and it's just one button for you to select, but it's important to note that we want to have you in complete control of who has access at all times. When it comes to other teachers, you can invite teachers as well. And the way this works is you as a teacher in a Google site can go and actually add other teachers. And so here's the support article on that. And while that site's loading, you have this invite teachers option. And all you have to do to add other teachers in Google is simply copy and paste their school email addresses, right? They have to be at the same domain. Whatever your school domain is, you'll copy and paste those teachers in. And what that allows is an entire school district could sync their Noteflight Learn site with Google and then invite all the teachers. Each individual teacher can sync their individual classes. And a teacher will only see the classes they teach, and students will only see the classes they're in. So you can have an entire school district, one Noteflight site, sync, invite all the teachers. Teachers can sync classes as needed. It's totally self-service and it's totally available. So a Noteflight site with Google could be one teacher at one school, 5 teachers at one school, or 50 teachers at 30 schools. However, and it all works the same, and it's totally flexible. So you have that option. And that is how to set up a Google Classroom site with Noteflight. Now, let's talk about setting up an LTI site and understand what that means. So setting up an LTI site integration with Noteflight Learn. You'll find all the instructions for LTI integration in the LMS external LTI integration section. Wow, that's a mouthful. LMS external LTI, what does all that mean? Well, if you use Canvas or Blackboard or Schoology or Moodle or PowerSchool or Brightspace or edX, I'm probably missing the other 27 that exist now. These are all learning management systems, or LMSs. And all of these subscribe to a protocol called LTI, or Learning Tools Interoperability. Don't worry, none of this is going to be on the test. The important thing is that if you're using Canvas, Moodle, Schoology, Blackboard, all those, you can integrate a Noteflight Learn site into that LMS directly. And you do that by, in the LMS, adding an external tool. Now, I'm going to show you the Noteflight pieces of this. There's some pieces that have to happen on your LMS side. Everyone does it slightly differently, but it's the same exact concept every time. It's called an LTI tool external integration, right? And this allows students to enter, teachers to enter, and assignments to happen. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Now I'm going to go back into my Noteflight Learn account, I'm going to actually log into Noteflight fresh, and I'm going to go create a new site here. And let me go ahead and log out of this person, and let me log in as I have a few people, right? So let's create a new site. Now, you will not have this many options. When you create a new site in Noteflight, you will select Set up LTI integration for another LMS. And this is all self-service as well. And this really takes 5 minutes or less. So I will LMS site integration. You will name your site here, and it's the same thing with Noteflight Learn. You're creating an LMS site that is a private site for students and teachers, and this will be accessed through your learning management system. Now, there's another piece of information you need, which is the login URL. So if you're using like Canvas or Moodle, you'll usually have like a Canvas instructor.yourschool, or sometimes your school will create like a benfranklinhighschool.org that is actual Canvas. But whatever URL you go to log in, you'll put that here. And that information is important for the integration. And then you will make this public. Now, I'm going to fake one right now, mylms.org. That is not a real one. So you'll add site. Now, what Noteflight's going to do is give you some information. You have to copy this down. You'll be able to get it later, but now you will go to your learning management system and you will be able to take the next steps. So I'll show you briefly what those look like. Right? In your LMS, you will go and it will ask you for some information, and it will basically ask for consumer key and basic LTI, and you literally just copy these two pieces of information into your LMS, and it's all connected. Now, what that means is that you can instantly actually log in to your LMS and you go into Noteflight. So the one thing to remember with LMS integration is that you don't have to roster anyone, right? After the integration happens, as soon as a student or teacher goes into your LMS and selects Noteflight, Noteflight will just let them in and it automatically happens. So that's a really, really cool feature about using something like Canvas or Schoology. So you'll just set it up, and again, you can integrate for the whole district or just one school. It totally doesn't matter either way. But the important thing is that if you do that, you can go, and I'll show briefly what this looks like. I'm actually in Canvas right now. So you'll load it in, and notice it just takes me into that site, and I have my own Noteflight account. So with an LTI integration, you set up an assignment here, and it launches you into Noteflight. And again, all of those instructions are available in the Noteflight Support Center under the entire section that has to do with LMS external integration. So that is LTI site integration setup. Now, setting up a standalone site with Noteflight Learn. A lot of folks ask about, do I need to integrate with Google? Do I need to integrate with my learning management system? And you don't have to. It is totally a choice. There are definitely benefits about being integrated with your learning management system, but sometimes having your own complete control of this is advantageous too. So we've looked at a couple options, but now let's look at standalone site setup with Noteflight Learn. So when you go to create a site in Noteflight Learn, you have a standalone option here. Same process we've seen before, and I'll call my standalone site. I hope that name's not taken. I'll run. And then you'll consent to the terms of use, and you'll add the site. It has already been taken. How about standalone site 1? Ta-da. Now, right now, copy this address. This is the URL that you and your students will log into at all times. Please bookmark and save this address, right? Now, we're going to visit the site, and notice it takes me right to add students. You have two options of adding students in a standalone site. You can add them manually, so I can just make up usernames. I can type student 1. student is another option too. You can call them that as well. Student to, etc. Noteflight does not collect student emails. Noteflight does not want student emails, does not need it. It is only usernames. And in a standalone site, you can put any username you want, right? Now, you can also select password. You can set these up with no password and just let the students make one up the first time, or you can give them all the same password here. It's totally up to you. And you can, by the way, you could copy and paste from a CSV. So if you have a list of like 100 student names and you just want to copy and paste in, you can just copy. I'll just keep copying these. These are all redundant names. You just copy and paste the whole list in, right? However you want to do it. So that's option one. I'm going to go back. Oops, I went back too far. Let's go back here. So now adding teachers, same process. Adding teachers, you just put usernames in, same exact process, right? The other option is to manage students with a CSV. So Noteflight supports CSV rostering. Now, you can upload your CSV file here, and Noteflight allows you to do three things. And I will admit, I am ill-prepared without a CSV file ready to go. So I'm going to pull up quickly and show you how this works in support. You have your entire standalone management section here, and here are all the instructions for CSV rostering, and you have step-by-step. Now, the interesting about CSV is all you have to do is upload a CSV of usernames. These can be all new accounts, but I know a lot of school districts have a lot of students, and you want to be able to roster and figure out how to manage them all. So if you have a large site and you're not sure of, oh my gosh, it's the end of the year, I know what students I have for next year, I can't remember which ones are in and how to do it, just upload a CSV of the students you know that you want, and Noteflight will match that, and it will say, here's a list of all the names that currently have accounts, here's a list of the ones that don't have accounts yet. In fact, Noteflight will also say, here's a third list, here's a whole bunch of usernames that are actually in your site that were not on the CSV. Noteflight will automatically separate this out for you and make your life easy. So at that point, you have options. You could say, great, I'd like to add these students, remove these students, add or remove these. It's super simple. So you can use the CSV rostering as flexible as you need to be, right? Add new students. You could upload a list of just the students you want to remove, or you could just say, I'm not sure what I have. Let me just put in the students I know I want next year, and Noteflight will separate them into columns and let you choose what to do. And that is how to set up your own standalone Noteflight Learn site. Now, let's talk about creating and organizing groups in a Noteflight Learn site. So in Noteflight Learn, when you're using an LTI integration or a standalone integration, standalone site, you have groups. Now for Google Classroom, just as a note, if you're in a Google Classroom site, which I'll go back here, Google Classroom automatically creates groups that mirror your classes. So for Google Classroom users, you don't have to worry about creating groups. Noteflight's going to do that for you, mirroring all your classes. If you're a standalone or LTI user, you have the opportunity to create your own groups. A group can be a collection of users. It could be students or teachers. A group could be a collection of scores or both. It usually ends up being both. So notice I have some groups here that are based on ensembles. I have some that are based on classes, and some I just have that are like, piano class or theory or whatever it is. So when I'll go into an existing group, when you go to create a group, you have a name of your group, you can upload an image, and you have different options. So you can assign which students you want in the group, or you can let students have open access and join by themselves. You can also say that anyone that can see the group can see all the content, or you can say the only content is members only. So you have some access settings. I'm going to leave these settings alone because most people like to put their students in groups. So then you can go to members and you can select select which students you want to add. So when you add students, you can just select ta-da, 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 and these students now have access to the choir group. Well, what does that mean? Well, I have some scores shared with choir. So all of these scores that were already in the choir group, those students I just added automatically now have access. So you have two options here. You could create a group that just has no students, but you can share a bunch of scores with it, and then you can add students and they automatically have a bunch of scores that they need to use. The example here would be like a music theory group where you have set up like a whole bunch of music theory assignments, and you could just add students and say, okay, you're now added, complete all these this semester, right? And you can even do something like music theory 1, music theory 2, and move your students through groups. They become like learning modules, but you can also group your students as like sections. Also note that students in a group can share scores with each other in the group. So like you create like a clarinet group and you can share scores about all kinds of stuff like being afraid of B natural and never passing B flat, right? Or squeaking on low tones and squeaking on high tones. In fact, just squeaking all the time because that's what clarinets do, right? You could create a group just for squeaking, however you want to do that. And you could do that with both an LTI site and a Google site, or I'm sorry, and a standalone site. You have unlimited groups. And again, just like everything else, I just want to point out that all of this is organized in the support center. So if you are looking for how to do this, there's creating and managing groups for a standalone site. And if you use an LTI, we have creating and managing groups with LTI. And this information is right here, step-by-step instructions for you to process. So that is creating and managing groups with the standalone site. Now, that's our overview on how to get set up. Now that we're set up, we're going to get into the fun part. We're going to start making music, entering notes, and all of that fun stuff. So now let's get into the editor and talk about how to use the editor. One note is I explained how to use the editor coming up. This is the same way I would demonstrate it to students. So if there's anything I can help pick up on the way I like to go through the first time, this is incredibly helpful. So using the Noteflight editor, note entry, menus, and palettes. When you start a Noteflight score, you get a blank 4-measure score ready to go. The first thing you can do is select a measure and you can automatically start entering notes. I just highlighted so you can see the little gray note head, and you can just go enter notes all you want. And you can click away. Now, I will say a lot of people like to point and click. That's probably the slowest way to do it. You could use your computer keyboard, I can't lift up here, and you could just type the letter names. So I can also type C, D, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, B, C. I'm just typing the letter names and it's entering the notes. Now, we haven't talked about duration yet. So I'm going to Command Z and delete all these notes now. What if I don't want a quarter note? Well, the idea behind Noteflight is enter notes as quick as possible. You have a duration option up here. So if I want that C to be a half note, now it's a half note. If I want it to be an eighth note, etc. And you can expand this option, and I'll show you these palettes in a second, to make them 32nd and 64th notes and all of that. There's also a great shortcut key, which is the bracket keys of your keyboard to the right of the P key. Left bracket makes the note smaller, the duration smaller, and right bracket makes the duration longer. And that's a really good place to be. The other thing to remember with note entry is that right above that right bracket key is the delete key on every keyboard. So your smaller duration, larger duration, delete flips a note to a rest, right? So now it's a rest. And I can make these 16th rests, right? I can arrow key over, I can make these, I can change the duration of these automatically. So the idea is that your left hand is typing notes on your computer keyboard. You could also type notes on a MIDI controller. If you have a MIDI controller plugged in, because Noteflight is web-based, the MIDI controller works on Google Chrome. And you can type in notes. You have a keyboard option up on screen as well if you have a touchscreen device. So I can tap a note. That's quite a low note. Let's not do that. Let's do something right. So you can type in keyboard, you can select them like that. That's way off the beaten path. Let's stay out there. But the idea is that your left hand's typing notes and your right hand's doing duration and rests. And if you do that, I'm going to type C, eighth note, D, E, F, G. Now I want to do a 16th note run. So I'm going to make this a 16th. I'm going to go F, E, D, C. I'm just going to type, and now I want that actually to be a quarter rest. So I'm going to hit delete. I'm going to use duration for a quarter rest. I'm going to arrow over. And once you get used to this, you're just typing notation like you're typing a Google Doc, right? The other shortcut key that's super helpful is the R key. R for repeat. And what repeat does is I'm just going to enter a note, and let's say I want to do a 16th note run. Repeat will repeat anything that's highlighted. So I have that 16th note G highlighted. I'll hit R, it repeats. Now, your arrow keys are your friend, because you can move the arrow keys up and down. So there's a cool combination of repeat, arrow down, repeat, arrow down. And I can make a super fast score like that, right? You can also repeat whole patterns. So you can also just click this entire measure and repeat an octave down, and you can just keep it going. That's a little insane, so I'm not going to do that. The R key is your friend. In fact, one of the fun things I like to do with students is give them some notes and patterns and tell them they have to compose something, but they can only do it by copy and pasting patterns, which helps them understand that music has patterns. So I'll give them like a few starter measures and say they can write whatever they want, but they have to take something. So if they want this half note, they have to copy it and they have to paste it over here. It helps learn that music is patterns and copy and paste in arrows. Quick way to get going, right? So here's our beautiful little score that we've made. So that is note entry. Now let's talk about the menus and the palettes, right? So menus and palettes, on the left, you have this hamburger menu. That is a technical software term. I'll actually make my whole screen one size bigger. And this hamburger menu will stay open. I personally keep this open at all times. I know some people like to close it. If you're on an iPad or a touchscreen device and you have screen real estate or a small Chromebook, some people like to close it to save a little space, but I have a wide screen, so I'm happy with it. Now, all of these are menu options. So there's a score menu, an edit menu, a duration menu, etc. Now, all of these menu options give you the ability to take action on any notes. As we saw, Noteflight's all about entering pitches first. So we enter notes, and now let's say I want to slur this 16th note run. Well, I can go to articulation, slur, and now I've slurred these. Notice as you hover, it opens the submenus and it shows you if shortcuts are available. So when I was in articulation, it says slur and it shows the S, right? Accents the apostrophe, staccato semicolon, tenutos colon, right? So strong accents quotes. So it shows the shortcut keys as you go. Now notice some of these score menu, these menu items are checked. The checks indicate that they're duplicated on the top. So if I click these various menus, they will either show or hide from the top. These will give you some palettes at the top. So you and your students can actually select, and I'm just going and clicking a few because I think that's fun, which ones you want to have. So these allow you to have some shortcuts up here. Now again, if you're using Noteflight on a mobile or touchscreen device, it's a lot easier to touch those palettes, and so you want to kind of organize your palettes on top. The palettes on top and the menu here, they're redundant. So whether you want to hit duration as a quarter note here, or you want to go to duration and hit quarter note here, it's the same action, but it gives you a choice of each. Notice that these palettes will also expand. So to save screen real estate, by default, they show up with shorter options. But if you see the arrow, they'll extend out to more advanced options. And you can totally choose how you want to use that. So the color palette's a really good example. We have standard colors, but you can expand out and go into classroom colors, which are the same as Boom Whacker colors. So if you'd like to notate music for Boom Whacker and you'd like to make this Boom Whacker Classroom G, you can make this Classroom G. So just a kind of heads up, that's how that works. And that is how Noteflight has note entry, menus, and palettes. Now, let's talk about guide search and user guide using the Noteflight editor. When using the Noteflight editor, you have your menus in the left and you have your palettes on the top. But let's say you want to take an action and you can't find it in here, right? Let's say I want to put an accent on this C and I don't know to go to articulation accent. Well, the one thing you should always know and you should always show your students is right above, the guide button right up here. This guide is one of the most awesome and important things of the Noteflight editor. And we try to put it as high level as possible, but it's so easy to miss. I get that. In the guide, you can search the entire editor for anything you need. So let's say I can't find accent. I'm just going to start typing accent. Notice it's auto searching as I go. So my fourth result is accent. I can keep searching and get down to it. There's accent. Now notice right underneath, it shows where accent is with a huge orange, Noteflight orange arrow, and it points. And if you can see, it's kind of hard to see on a zoom, but articulation is actually highlighted, so it's showing you, it opens the articulation menu and it points to accent for you when you do that. That's really important because it's like self-learning. It's showing your students where this is. So you can go and you can select this action on the menu, but also the action that this result is actually selectable. So I can click this and it applied my accent right there. That works for anything you can find. Oh, I want to write a song. How do I do lyrics? Well, let's just find lyrics. Aha, text palette, lyrics, but I don't want to scroll my mouse all the way over there. That's way too much work. Now I sound like the kids, right? So I'm just going to click this and say hi. And now I've written my first lyric, which is hi. Very original. So you could do that with anything. Now, let's talk about the user guide, because this guide search is also directly tied into the Noteflight user guide. So I still have lyrics in here, right? And let's keep this now. So in lyrics, notice it shows editor. It's searching in the editor, but also it will search in the user guide. So now I can go to lyrics in the user guide and it will always open in a new tab, and it takes me to the Noteflight user guide, and it takes me right to the lyrics section, and it shows exactly how to use lyrics. And so every section of the user guide directly corresponds to the palettes. So let's just show you, I'll show you what that means. So I'll go back to my menu. I have a score menu, an edit menu, a duration menu, etc., all the way down to view. If I go to my user guide, there's your shortcuts, there's some quick start information, note entry, but then it gets right into the palettes: score, edit, duration, rhythm. It follows the same order. Not only that, every action has its own URL. So if I want to learn to transpose, I can click transpose. Here's the instructions, but notice this is a dedicated URL up here. So if you're creating an assignment for students and you'd like students to learn to transpose, you can actually take that URL and paste it in your assignment and say, here's a link to your Noteflight assignment. And by the way, you can get ahead of the questions, right? Here's the user guide information on how to transpose. But I guarantee once you show the students that they can actually search the Noteflight editor like a Google search, they'll just use that and find it right away. So you have access there as well. The last thing I'll show you is that in the user guide and guide search section, you also, lyrics in the editor and the user guide, we always show you the help center. So if you can't remember that support.noteflight.com help center, you can click and it will always take you or your students to the help center where you can find the information. And the help center has step-by-step articles with pictures and everything you need. So that is using the guide search and user guide. Now, let's talk about the score details panel in the Noteflight editor. In the Noteflight editor, you have this score details panel right here, and I'm going to get myself out of the way of it. This is a really important piece because this is sort of your home base for all information about the score. In Noteflight, you can actually, when you compose music, you can give it a genre. You can say it's a children's song, it's a country song for children. I like it. At beginner level, you have these genre difficulty formats in here, which are nice. You can also add cover art, and this is something fun for students as well. If they compose a piece of music and they want it to look real, they can upload an image to support their song, like their own cover art. You can also search. We have a little image search here. So you can, I'm just going to see if Music Notes has, you can put up a little thing, you can find an image you want, and you can crop and resize it and create your own little cover art here. And that's pretty fun. So you can go in and say, I'd like to create this. And it gives the music some cover art, right? So those are your score details, hence the score details panel. Now, very important, share. This share option, and we'll talk about this a little later, the share option is in score detail is where you go to share your score with other students, whether it's an assignment, whether you want to share with another teacher. Everything you create in Noteflight is yours until you actively share it with someone else, right? So this is where your share section is, and it's very important to remember. Score details is also where you work with SoundCheck. This is where you create a SoundCheck score, and we'll show those in later videos. But score details is a really important section that allows you to give info on the score, provide cover art, but also share it with other people and provide sound check. Also, if you share scores, Noteflight Learn, students can actually comment and like and favorite scores. So in score details, I'll also point out that as soon as you share it, and I'm actually showing sharing later, so I won't get into details. As soon as you share it, you can actually embed the score, which is really cool. So you have this option, copy a direct link. By the way, once you share a score, the exact URL of the score in the URL bar of your browser is what you send to share. You can send that to anyone, right? It's the same exact URL. Or you can select here and copy the link. But all this is doing is copying this link for you. So once you share a score, you're making the score visible to others, but you do have to send that URL. So that is how to use the score details panel of a Noteflight score. Now, let's talk about using the parts panel of the Noteflight editor. So in the Noteflight editor, another important panel to learn in our 101 level course is the parts panel. Noteflight, by default, the first thing you see is a score, and you can create multiple parts and you can look at individual parts and scores. So the score and the parts are dynamically connected, and that's what I'll show you now. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to probably make this piece of music a little more palatable. So let me see if I can do something that's not as crazy, which I'll probably just end this on a G and see what happens. So there's my thing. We're not going to slur to nowhere. So we have a little song here. Not a great song, but a song. So I open up the parts panel and it defaults to a piano instrument. Now, I can change this, right? So if I want this to be a trumpet, the most glorious and noble of all instruments, I can say trumpet. Now notice Noteflight defaults to concert pitch. The very first thing in the score menu, notice parts panel and concert pitch is the next thing. Show in concert pitch, unshow in concert pitch. Hashtags, no hashtags. So always remember Noteflight defaults to concert pitch. I'm gonna go ahead and take concert pitch off so you can see the transpositions. Now, if I want to add a part, I can add another part. So let's add an alto sax. Let's make this really fun. Let's add a viola. I'll show other clefs. Let's add a tuba. I'm just searching. By the way, I'm going quickly here. You have categories, so if you want to search through the different instrument sounds, you can, right? But you can just search and find what you're looking for, but they're all categorized up here. The other thing to notice is that you're selecting the instrument. So I'll select bassoon, But if I want to change the name of the part, you can do that. So if you have bassoon 1, right, you can do that, or bassoon 2. So you totally have that option. In fact, I'll show you, like a trumpet's a good example. Sometimes you want to put like in B flat, you can add this, or trumpet in C. You can even change the key. So the trumpet is the sound. I can change the transposition and call it trumpet in C. And now I've created a C trumpet. So you actually can create a sound, but you can create all these other instruments as well. You're not limited to only the instruments Noteflight provides. You can take a sound and do anything else. In fact, you could take a bassoon and call it a didgeridoo, and no one would know the difference. Just kidding. I like didgeridoos a lot. I would never offend them like that. Okay, so now I'm just going to quickly copy and paste all these notes in. Notice Noteflight already automatically handles the transposition for the instruments. So here it is. Now, I have a trumpet in C way down here, and I want to get it up to below. So I can drag and drop the order of the parts panel, and it automatically does it. So you can drag and drop these, you can edit the part, and you can play back. Now that we have parts, let's hear my masterpiece. Beautiful. I love it. Now, it's playing back the full score. You can also select play only parts in view, which allows you to do exactly what I say, play only parts in view. So I'm viewing all parts now, but notice in the parts panel, you can select which individual part you want to see. So if you wanted to send this to your students, you could send them the full score, and the student can say, well, I play alto sax, so the student only plays alto sax. With play only parts in view enabled, that's exactly what it means. If the student's looking at the alto sax part, they will only hear alto sax. They can also disable play only parts in view. This means I'm looking at the alto sax part, but I'm going to save this, but I'm hearing the whole thing. So let me go back. Parts panel. I'm going to show all my parts. I'm going to listen to all my parts. Well, it doesn't want to behave right now. I think I confused it by switching it too fast. So we have all the parts here, still playing alto sax, but it should actually play just all the parts. But we'll cover this in 201. I'll reset and create a new score and show you how this works in 201. I'm probably moving too fast. So that is using the parts panel in Noteflight Learn. Now let's talk about SoundCheck. So SoundCheck overview in Noteflight Learn. Noteflight Learn has its own performance assessment directly built in, and it's called SoundCheck. And SoundCheck gives you ratings on pitch and rhythm, and it gives you a score. So SoundCheck is directly integrated with Noteflight Learn, and it's actually connected to your Noteflight Learn scores. It has its own set of controls, but it functions like every other musical score in Noteflight Learn. So let's take a look. Here I am in a SoundCheck score in Noteflight Learn. Now, notice that I have a little bit of a score details panel, right? And also I have my own control set. So you notice we no longer have the editor controls because we're not in the Noteflight editor. Now we're in a SoundCheck score. But in SoundCheck, you can play, right? And you're playing all the parts. You can also isolate individual parts, just like Noteflight. You can see the full score, or you can dial into just an individual part, right? You can control the tempo of SoundCheck, right? So the score was composed at 68, but if I'd like to learn it and practice it slower, I can use the slider, or you can do these cool like -1 beat per minute, -5. So if you're not a slider person, you have other options, or you can always reset back. You can mark a selection. So let's say I only want to assess the first few measures. I can select that, reset that selection. There's a tuner built in, so it does assess intonation, so you'll want to make sure that you're in tune to start. And then there's some more information that'll come up we'll talk about later. So the SoundCheck controls are really designed for students and teachers to use left to right, but you see the full score, students select their part, and let's see what SoundCheck does. Now, I'm not a violin player, but I'm going to play the violin part on my handy dandy piccolo trumpet and show you how this works. So I'm going to select my part. I'm going to listen to it, make sure it's what I want to hear. Now I'm just hearing the demo audio. So I'm going to go into tracks. When I hit playback, I might want to hear the backing track. That's the full score. So I can actually listen to this with the full score. That's a lot nicer. So I like that. So now when I hit record, do I want to hear the metronome or the backing track? Notice SoundCheck does not let students record along with the demo audio. And because that's just like learning by rote, like we don't want them to like hear the thing they're trying to assess. So they only have a couple options. They could record with the metronome only, which they can't hear anything but the click, or they can record with the backing track. And later in 201, I'll show you how you can control what students can do. So if you don't want them to hear anything but the metronome, you can control that. But back to the SoundCheck controls, you also can have the opportunity to show or hide cursor. A lot of times the cursor can be distracting when recording along, or sometimes students don't count their rests because the cursor is like there. So you can control this option as well. I tend to keep the cursor off for assessment, but I'm going to keep it on so you can see what I'm doing while I'm doing it. So I've got backing track set, cursor set, I'm ready to go. Let's record and see. Let me go ahead and mark selection. So I'm going to record this first part, and let's see how SoundCheck works. All right, so I had some tempo issues, I had some note fumbling around, good mix of things and stuff in there. So I got a 64 fair, and we got a 90 on pitch, but a 37 on rhythm. So let's take a look. SoundCheck. Green, yellow, orange, or red, the color lets me know I played wrong notes. The variations of the line let me know that I deviated from the rhythm. So the line goes down, I was a little too slow, line goes up, I was too fast, and I started slow and I rushed, so you'd expect that little swoop. If this feedback is a little intense for you, there's also a simpler feedback option where you get like a more simple grid, and you can hover and you can just see little error messages. Though I do find the full feedback, once you get used to it, very helpful, right? So now I can hover and see, and as a student, I can see all my little error messages. I played a wrong note here, right? Wrong note here, little flat, to be expected. Right? So the other cool thing about SoundCheck is this is some feedback. I can record again and try to do a better job, but the thing I love is student accountability. So now I can go back into tracks and I can say I have all these extra options. So now there's a matched recording. That's what I just recorded. I can add a backing to the recording. So I could hear my matched recording with the backing track, right? You have all these options in here, which I can play for you. So if I hit play, it will actually play back. Oop, I need to select this. It'll play it back. Oh, how do you use SoundCheck? I don't even know. Oh, I didn't select match recording as a backing track. But also you can choose to hear easily between what the demo was supposed to be and the match recording. And this is what I really wanted to show you. So notice this cursor is green on the staff. And then if I select the recording area, it's green on the recording. So I can click here and hit play, and it will play what it's supposed to sound like. Or I can select what I played and hear my recording. I know what happened. I'm using loopback to play my Chrome back through. So when I hit record, loopback recorded what you were hearing back into SoundCheck on top of my trumpet. I should have turned off that loopback section. So that's why it's a little weird right now. But I think we get so students can click their notes, click this note, and they can hear. So you can actually hear my trumpet in the background, but it's sort of mixed in with everything you were hearing. Again, students can do this, they get their assessment, and that's totally in. So that's your SoundCheck overview. Now, let's talk about sharing scores. We've identified in Noteflight Learn that you have a Noteflight score in the editor, which we talked about here. And then we have this idea of a SoundCheck score, which is this. So either of these can be shared with other students or teachers. So sharing scores in Noteflight Learn using activity templates. When you assign a Noteflight score for an assignment, you'll always want to use the activity template option. What this means is any student that opens your score is automatically given their own unique copy for them to complete. And I'll show you what this looks like with both Noteflight and SoundCheck. So, in a Noteflight score, you will immediately see in this score details panel, I'm going to share this score. Now, when I share this, you have two options, right? Allow members to view, comment, or edit, or create activity template. I'm going to select create activity template. Anything you want your students to complete, you almost always want to hit create activity template. So now, who has access? Anyone that has access to your site, maybe just a group or maybe just an individual, right? So I usually hit all site members because I have to give them the link. And now you can copy this link and send it to your students. Now, when a student opens this, they get their own copy. So let me actually pull up one that's fully completed so you can see what this looks like. This is the cooking show where I mixed all the ingredients, but now I'm just going to walk over to the rotisserie oven and pull out a delicious looking chicken. All right, so here's this. So here's recording in Noteflight Learn. Now, here's a recording exercise. I have shared this as an activity template. Now it says there are 20 copies. Every time a student opens one, they get their own copy. This is super cool because you can click and see every student's individual score right here. And you can go in, and I'm going to look at Bobby's version. So now I am teacher John, but I'm looking at Bobby's version of this score, and I can comment and give feedback and all of that. So that's how you share as an activity template. Now the same thing works in SoundCheck. So let's say I want to assign Shenandoah to my students. Well, I go into share, and I'm actually in the way. Let me get out of the way. I go into share over there, and I will hit share score. Create activity template. Now with SoundCheck, you still have who will access, so you can select who gets the assignment, but there's a couple other options. Anytime you create an activity template, you can choose in SoundCheck, do I want to change the score goal? Do I want to change the difficulty of the assessment? And do I want to limit attempts? So with the SoundCheck activity template, you can say, okay, every student that gets a copy, they have to have the hardest, most strict level of assessment, and I'm only going to give them one attempt to complete it. Maybe 3 will be a little nicer, but I want them to get 85%. And you also have 2 modes. Unlocked mode is what I've been showing. Students can play with all the controls. Locked mode means that students cannot change any settings. So if I wanted to share a score in locked mode as a teacher, I would go in and say, you can only hear the metronome, you can't hear the cursor. I'd like you to do this a little quicker. Let's try it at 78 BPM. And I'd only like you to play the first measures. So I'm setting this up, right? You can set all of this up in SoundCheck. Now I've got it exactly how I want my students to experience it. You hit share, you go into locked mode. The students get all the settings you set and they cannot change them. So you have 2 different modes, and it's totally up to you of how you want to use that. I'll make it hard. I'll give them 3 attempts. I'll set it to 85 or 83. All site members done. And the same thing, you can send this link to your students, right? So that's how activity templates are used to share scores. Now, I also want to show briefly Google Classroom assignments because I know a lot of folks use Google Classroom. To share Google Classroom assignments, I'll go back into my Google Class. I'll just show briefly that if I have a score in Noteflight, now here's my brand new Google Classroom assignment. So I'm going to create a quick assignment, a quick assignment. And we'll talk about worksheets in a second. So this is compose something, or maybe it's a scale, right? We'll give students a quick scale in here. Okay, there we go. Play this scale. Now, notice in score details, you can still share the score, but because this is a Google Classroom site, you can actually create a Google Classroom assignment right here. So you can select your multi-select which classes you'd like to assign it. You can give it a title. Oops. You can provide instructions for your students. You can give it a point value in Google. You can give it a due date, right? And you can even choose to save as draft, schedule, or assign. So you can schedule for a future date, assign now. But this creates this assignment in your Google Classroom automatically for you. The other thing, it's automatically creating that activity template so you don't have to think about it. So if you're using Noteflight Learn with Google Classroom, you can just create assignments directly from Google, from Noteflight right into your Google Classroom automatically, which is a super handy feature. So that is Google Classroom assignments. Now, let's talk about sharing scores in Noteflight Learn. To share scores in Noteflight Learn, you might have a situation where you don't want to use an activity template, meaning you want students or other teachers to see exactly your version of the score, not get their own copy. Now, what does this look like? Well, when you go to share scores, the other option that you'll see is, and I'm going to go back to my score from earlier just so we can get situated here. 800 scores. All right, so Noteflight Learn 101, I'm going to edit my sharing. I'm going to go to allow members to view, comment, or edit. So now I'm not creating that activity template. I'm actually telling Noteflight that I want other people to see the exact score that I'm looking at. Now, view, comment, or edit, when I hit all site members, or I can say a group. We talked about groups earlier, so let's say I want clarinets doesn't make any sense because there's no clarinet parts. Let's say I want my trumpets to practice this. I can let my trumpets view, add their own comments, which is the comment panel, or I can have my trumpet players edit. Be very careful with giving edit access to your score because anyone can change your exact score. So let's say I want to give them view access. So I can do that. You can also go to all site members and you can do the same thing, view, comment, or edit. Now there's another option here that's called let people copy this score. So in this case, right, if you'd like to let people copy the score, that means that they can only view your score, but it does allow them to save their own copy if they want to make their own edits and not change your score. So this is a really good combination that's most common is, I want to give view or comment access. They can comment on my score, but if they want to do something, they can make their own copy. Totally up to you. The last thing I'll show is show this score in search results and public score listing. If you click that, what that means is it shows up in your public site. So in your community section of Noteflight Learn, you have this public scores section, and there's my Noteflight Learn 101 with my little cover art because I said show in public scores. So there's this cool option in Noteflight Learn where students can share their music with each other, or you could have that whole community section, which I showed, where students can actually create their score and share it and let everyone can check it out. So that is sharing scores in Noteflight Learn. All right, last piece, running right on time. We're going to talk about using content libraries in Noteflight Learn. Noteflight Learn provides content libraries for you to access and use. And there's several different versions of content. We're always adding new content to Noteflight Learn. And everything in Noteflight Learn is an editable Noteflight file that can be used, edited, adapted in both Noteflight and in SoundCheck. So let's talk about using content libraries in Noteflight Learn. Now, the included content library is what comes with every Noteflight Learn site. The content libraries are an extra charge, and we'll talk about that. But included content includes public domain melodies, sight reading examples, scales, theory exercises, chorales. There's all kinds, like 500 things in here, right? And so these are really fun to use. They're pretty common things. Composition exercises, there's preloaded composition exercises in here. They get, they start simple. They can get pretty complicated as well, which is fun. I'll open up number 16. And they're sequentially numbered. C minor, different time signatures. So now you have to come in and, and again, you can use this, right, as an editable copy or sound check. So if I wanted to use basic composition 16 with my students, or if I wanted to use a version of basic composition 16 with my students, I would hit create editable copy. That creates an editable copy. I know we try to label things for what they do. And now notice that this is your own Noteflight score in your own account. So if I want to do this, I'm actually going to do this real quick. D minor composing. Or I like fun names. So I'll say, what time does D minor start? So let's say I want to use this differently. Well, I'm going to select all. I'm going to go into pitch. I'm going to transpose. I'm going to go up a step, major second. Now I'm going to put it in D minor. I'm going to change my instructions. So this is totally editable, right? All of these like included scores. Now I have a D minor version. So I've tweaked it. There you go. Now, what can I do with this? Well, I can share it with my students as an activity template and assign them to do this thing. If I'm using Google Classroom, I can create a Google assignment. And there's no notes here, so SoundCheck doesn't make sense. But if it had notes, you can create a SoundCheck out of it. So that is the included content. Now, other content are these content libraries here. The Noteflight Learn content libraries included copyrighted content available from Howliner. Noteflight is a Howliner company, and these are available for, let's see if I can get myself out of the way, pop, band, choir, piano, guitar, and orchestra. So you have all these different libraries, and you can peruse these and use them. When you add content libraries to your account, you get all of them. So if you're a choir person, you have all this choir content. You can find scores that you want. Oh, All of Me, 2-part SAB. There's 3 different voicings available, which is pretty cool. There's All of Me by Mac Huff. Great. So what can I do with this? I have 2 options. I can create an editable copy and make a Noteflight score, or I can create a SoundCheck score. Right? So I can actually create an assessment out of this, and bam, we now have an immediate SoundCheck score, and your students can go in and say, you know what, I want to sing part 1, and they can actually assess themselves performing part 1 right in SoundCheck. So that's all available from the content libraries. Now, last but certainly not least is Noteflight Learn also includes all the essential elements band and string exercises. So this other library, the essential elements methods, show up for band book 1, 2, and 3 and strings book 1, 2, and 3. So you could use this content as well. Here's all the exercises. So if you use essential elements, you can easily use these right here. Pull up grandfather's clock, and here's the activity ready to go. Here's the full score. Now remember, you could use these with SoundCheck or and create a Noteflight copy. So a couple things with essential elements. Some people like to create an editable copy and let students compose another 8 measures. Maybe these are short exercises. Or you can create SoundCheck and immediately just create an assessment out of this score. So that's one really benefit. If you're using essential elements and you want to have assessment, you can create SoundCheck out of this, and it will give you the SoundCheck score automatically. And now students can go in and say, I play the bassoon, bam. Now I can do my test on number 24 in Essential Elements Band Book 2 bassoon. Done, right? Or the other option is they can go in and they can create an editable copy in Noteflight. And let's say I go back. The other option to do is I like to do this with book one content. One of the things with method books is we introduce a new concept, new note, rest, and then we keep on moving, right? So let's say I want to do 4x4. I bet it's 4 notes. So this has counts. Let's say I want to create an editable copy, and now I can make this a composition exercise where I can ask my students to say, hey, count and clap this section, but also add your own 4 measures of the same notes, and they can do that as well. And again, because Noteflight lets you view parts, if I just want to see the flute part, there is my flute part, right? So all of this is there, all of this is available. And that is using content libraries in Noteflight Learn, including editable copies and SoundCheck. All right, that was a lot. Everything is available in the support articles. What we're going to do now is we're going to take about a 4-minute breather. Mainly, I'm going to take a breather, and we'll come right back in at the 201 level things. And Danielle and Amber are here to answer any questions you have. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes, and we'll start with the 201 section. All right, friends, I can't believe that we only had one person drop off. You're in it for the long haul. This is fantastic. I am energized. I chugged my bottle of water. I am ready to go. Welcome to Noteflight Learn 201. You have all passed your 101 level certification, IW 101, and we're ready to go. So we're going to add some new things, but really we're going to do this time is we're going to build upon that fast overview, and depending on how much time we have and how fast I can talk, we can get into some really cool stuff. We might even do a 301 later because there's some really fun things on. So let's get going and look at some 201 level features. So the first thing, Noteflight Learn 201. Let's talk about using keyboard shortcuts in Noteflight Learn. I know a lot of more advanced composers, when you get used to using, you really like your keyboard shortcut. So I want to show you a quick feature that's super helpful, is that I mentioned before, as you hover in the palettes, if there is a shortcut available, notice that the shortcut is shown. So sharp is the plus sign, flat is the minus sign. I really encourage you and your students to get used to using shortcuts because that is the most effective way of moving quickly when editing in Noteflight. Now, you'll notice not every feature has a shortcut, right? So there are actually options to do keyboard shortcuts. So in the edit menu, look at keyboard shortcuts. Noteflight has an entire option for you to create your own keyboard shortcuts for anything that does not have them. And it looks like I've already tried to do some in here that hasn't been used. So let me delete this. So I'll show you how this works. So you could also use the keyboard shortcut options to see where the shortcuts are. So let's say I wanted to make a shortcut for transpose. Now I'm going to say T. Oops, I actually hit a caps lock. I don't want to do that. Let's hit T and see what happens. Uh-oh, it's already used. This is a cool thing because you might realize. So notice Noteflight's going to say, hey, T is already text, try again. So you can say, okay, well, let me try Shift T. Shift T is available. So now I can make Shift T my shortcut. I hit OK, I select all, I hit Shift T, and my transposition menu will come up, right? Well, it should come up. Oops, I gotta select it. How do you use Noteflight? Do I even know? Right? And well, I'll go back in here and show. So that will actually come up. I don't know if I hit done actually. I think that was user error. It was definitely user error because I didn't actually finish it. So now let's see if it did it that time. Trying to move too fast. Okay, so now pitch Shift T is in there. We all see it. Let's see if we can do this again. Select all, Shift T. There it is. I know how to use it now. Who's giving this demo? There's my transpose menu. So you can add all of your shortcuts. Now the next question is, well, how do I remember all my shortcuts? Well, check it out. There's a cool article here. So if you go to the Support Center, it shows how to use keyboard shortcuts. There is a downloadable guide that we've given on all the shortcuts. And I have this pulled up for you to see. We have it for Mac or Windows computers. So this is an Excel sheet. It's also available as a PDF. Here's all the characters available. And here's all the various combinations, right? Because you have it, once you see this, it all makes sense. There's a, like C is used for the note C, but you can hit Shift C, Option C, Shift and Option C, Shift Command C, Option Command C, Shift Option Command C. So this is pre-filled with what shortcuts Noteflight already uses. And if you decide to say, oh, I'd like to make Option K to do something, you can say, you know what, you can just use this and you can print off your own Excel file, right? So we give you these completely downloadable so you can customize your own shortcuts however you want. I'm not going to save this. So that is using keyboard shortcuts in the Noteflight editor. Now, let's talk about using the formatting panel of the Noteflight editor. I've selected a 4-part chorale from the Noteflight Learn libraries to demonstrate using the formatting panel. Now, quick refresh way back to 101 level, we have the parts panel, which lets us show individual parts, right? Now, the other option is the formatting panel, which I'm going to talk about now. This is when it gets more advanced. You can format your score and all of your parts and individual parts independently. So what does this mean? Well, let's say that I would like my score in landscape. And let's say I would like my score. Notice I've selected full score up here. So that's what I'm editing now. And it shows you what you're editing, right? By the way, you'll notice that Noteflight always has side panels, right? You have your menu on the left and you have your formatting on the right. We do not like things floating in your face as you're trying to compose. So no disrespect to any other software product, but a thing that pops up and another thing that pops up and things that pop up all in your face, we find that very confusing. It's at the heart of our editor philosophy to keep the music in view at all times and let you work on the side, but always see what's happening to the music while you do it. So that's a very common theme that you'll notice. Now, so I'm going to move my notes around. I'm making my notes a little bigger. You see, I'm like actually can see the score edit. So one thing I like to do is say, I'd like to get, there's 4 states. I'd like to get 2 systems per page. So let me tweak this. Let me make my staff spacing a little smaller. You see how I'm getting my staff spacing tighter, my note spacing tighter. You can kind of go to, there it goes. I want to get this right here. Cool. So I'm happy. I got a landscape score. I've got 2 systems per page. Life is good. Let's say I want to move some text around. I'd like this prompt to be a little bigger. Okay, so we've got this set up. Now, what about my parts? Well, by default, I've selected parts. The parts inherit the score. But what if I don't want my parts in landscape? Let me put my parts in portrait. Parts and portraits, it's very alliterative. Make my note size bigger. I think the system spacing is way too much. Let me tighten this up. Notice all my parts are highlighted and there's a little eyeball in one. So I'm looking at the soprano part, but the changes I'm making are affecting all parts, and you can choose which part you want to look at while you're making your changes just to see how it all works out. Maybe I want the notes to be really big, but now I don't like my prompt that big. Let me bring that down. So I've made these updates, right? Now let's say, and these apply to all 4 parts. This applies to every part. Now let's say I want to do something with the bass part. Like I don't like the way the systems break. I want to break this here. And I want to make the bass part, maybe I need to make the notes really big for the bass voice. So I'm going to make the bass voice really big. Notice I selected bass voice. So now I have custom formatted my full score, my parts, and even down to the details of my bass parts. And again, all the settings are available for every individual part or all parts of score. So those include showing bar numbers. You can put bar numbers on the part. You can put bar numbers on the score. Standard font versus jazz font. All of these options you can see. Sizing all the different elements you can resize. Text, all the different text elements you can resize. Page setup, all the different margins and adjustments. Again, you can apply these independently. Now, the cool thing is that now when I go back in my parts panel, guess what? I isolate the soprano. There's my properly formatted soprano. There's my properly formatted alto. There's my properly formatted tenor. And there's my bass that has bigger notes. I love this feature, right? You have complete control of your full score and all your parts down to every little detail, but it's all dynamically connected at all times. And I'll tell you a secret, coming soon, being worked on right now, Noteflight is adding multiple fonts for every piece of text. So you'll see very soon the ability to choose from, I can't remember the final number. It's all the Google fonts, a bunch of other custom fonts. I think it's like 12 or 18 or 20 different fonts with the bold, italic, all of that. So this panel is going to update and you'll have complete control of different fonts, which I think is really cool. One other power tip, since this is now the 201 level, is when you're formatting your parts, also know whether you've selected it in the parts panel or in the formatting panel, your page breaks and system breaks actually apply. So if I go into the alto part and say I want 2 measures of system, I'm going to break this so I see 2 measures of system. and I'm just hitting enter to do page breaks. I could spend like 16 hours on the editor. So I know there's a lot of things I'm going quickly over, but we think these are the cool power tips. So I've kind of edited this part. Cool. Now my soprano part hasn't changed. My tenor part hasn't changed, but my alto part's changed. All of those are retained at the part level. So now you can exit out of formatting. You can go into parts panel. Here's my show all full score. Here's my alto part with system breaks. Here's my soprano part, and you can also do combinations. So notice as soon as you start combining, you're showing subsets of the score. So you can show any combination of parts you want, solo individual parts, etc. And the last thing I'll show with power format, all of that, and our power tips is when you go to print, you can print just the full score, just the individual parts, or you can print full score and individual parts. The same with PDF. You can export PDF of full score and individual parts automatically. So all those formatting changes, you hit one button, everything prints out, hand them to your players, life is good. That is the formatting panel in the Noteflight editor. Let's talk about view options in Noteflight editor. This is a quick feature, but it's important to note that you have up here this view option, and I want to talk in view and zoom together. So we've been looking, and by default, everything's in page view. What is page view? Well, it looks like a piece of paper, right? And our formatting panel sets it up as different page sizes. Now, you have different views in Noteflight. So I'm going to go and just isolate one part, my soprano, because they'll get very upset if they're not the part I isolate. And I'm going to go into strip view, which makes it scrolling, right? We also have this idea of flow view, which actually takes up the whole screen. It actually adapts to the full size. I really like flow view. It's overlooked, but here's the thing about page view. If you're writing music for kids to read on Chromebooks are not 8.5 by 11. They're usually like 1200 by whatever the 16 by 9 ratio is. Flow view, if you put something in flow view, it will expand the music out to take up the screen width. That's what flow view does. It goes end to end, and it will be adaptive to your screen size, right? So flow view will adapt when you open it. So the cool thing is now that when you go into flow view, you are adaptive. Look at that. Flow view is responsive to the screen width. So flow view is awesome because think about how much screen real estate we waste sometimes when we put things in page view. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit to see it'll zoom to fit. Like we go into page view and we have all this dead space, right? So if you're going to print something on 8.5 by 11 paper, yes, format it in page view. But if kids are going to play into their Chromebooks, you can have it go across in strip view or flow view. And then last is perform view. The difference between perform view and flow. Perform goes top to bottom. So if you have like a Bluetooth page turner, or you want to see this height to height, you can scroll through pages in perform view. So it's really important to know those views, and of course you can zoom. So you have zoom to fit in page view, but you can control the zoom as well. So sometimes zooming in is super helpful, especially if you're trying to like adjust a lyric or adjust some elements. You can go back to zoom to fit, bring it down, save, and all of these views are dynamic. So like everything else, you have all of these various views. Really important tip to learn, flow view for Chromebooks. Game changer. So that is using view options in Noteflight. Now, audio recording in the Noteflight editor. The Noteflight editor also allows you to audio record. Now, of course, you use SoundCheck to audio record and get performance assessment, but the Noteflight editor lets you audio record so you can actually sync music to the notation. Now, why would you do this? Well, it could be performance assessment. Maybe you want students to record something, but you don't want to have them see the feedback through SoundCheck. But the other option is, what about having students compose a piece of music and then tell you what you want it to sound like, right? We could talk about notation sounds and playback all day long, wrong, but a notation generated audio file is never going to sing lyrics. It's never going to dictate, breathe, phrase, right? So you could record your music the way you'd like it presented. You could also have like a first chair player come in and record so other students can hear. You can have younger students compose and have older students go in and record their music for them so they can hear it. All sorts of fun things we can do with this. But let's see how this works. We've had so much success with things working the first time. So all right, so I have a, let me go back to format this. I actually want to format this. So here's a great example. I've played with this a lot and I've totally messed all this up. Now's a good time to talk about version history. This is not in recording, but I'm going to show it anyway. I'd like to get back to the original version of this. Every time you hit save in Noteflight, it stores a version. So I've made all these different versions and you can see all the various things. Oh, that's awesome. Refresh, say a little prayer, and everything's fine. But I'm going to go back to the very first version, just restore and take me back to where we started, which it did. So there we are. We're back. I'm in page view. I'd like to go ahead and fit to page, zoom to fit. So here we are. Now I don't have any of the things I just messed up. So audio recording in Noteflight Learn Editor. We're going to go ahead and show this audio recording. So let's say I want to record the soprano part. Da, 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 da. Trumpet, trumpet, trumpet. Let's see how this one works. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into record mode. Now, in record mode, quick tip is there are setup options. So if you haven't used record mode yet, go through setup. So it gave me the range of where I was going to go. It's not hearing the volume, but I have a gate on my mic, so I'm going to skip this. It asked me what my microphone wants to be. I'm going to say yes. You can set up the audio timing. This is a really important step, and you probably will hear this because I'm using this loopback thing again. Latency is a very real thing. Anyone that's tried to record with headphones, Noteflight audio recording has an automatic latency fixer thingy-mabobber. And so essentially what you want to do is you want to get your playback device, which might be these headphones, close to your speaker device, which I have here, and you're going to let it time itself. So I held my headphones next to my microphone. Noteflight played a tone. Noteflight counted in milliseconds how long it took my microphone to pick up that tone. Noteflight has synced that timing together so that the latency will be taken care of by Noteflight. Coolest recording setup feature ever. Make sure your students do this because otherwise latency is very real. So let's start my recording. All right, so we have audio recording, and Noteflight has now added an audio recording file to it. Notice the soprano part just popped up and said, that's not the Noteflight generated audio for the soprano part. That's John Malinzak's audio. Now, again, because of this webinar and recording, I'm using loopback so you can hear what I'm doing. So it probably recorded exactly what you heard. Hence, loopback is doing what it's supposed to do. Cool. So I'm doing some more recording with you in a second. So I'll quickly show what this looks like, and I will turn off the loopback so it doesn't break this. Let me try this one more quick time and see if this fixes the audio problem. I won't do the whole thing. Let's do a few measures. All right. right, so notice you can record in segments too. So you see these little like side that shows I only recorded a certain segment, and you can hit this info button and it says the segment is from 0 seconds to 11.65 seconds. So I have some recorded audio in Noteflight. It looks like my mic compressor still crushed it. So now I can go into parts and I can say I only want to hear the soprano, and it's a little awesome. And I'm using a compressor so I can play trumpet loud and it doesn't mess up your ears. And you can tell that it was a lot of compression. So I'm going to actually take that up a little bit for the next time. So now you see the recordings totally built in, and that's how you do it. So that's audio recording in Noteflight. Lots of options. Students can record their parts. If you're doing songwriting, right, you could just play guitar and sing, which is another great example, but lots of fun uses there. So that's audio recording in Noteflight. Now let's talk about media sync in the Noteflight editor. In Noteflight Editor, you can also sync a score to a YouTube video or a SoundCloud file or any audio file that's hosted on the internet. So if you find a link.mp3, you can sync it. Little known feature, this unlocks a plethora of amazing, engaging assignments for students. Because we are now taking, and it's, most people use YouTube. YouTube is great. You take a YouTube video, you sync it up with a piece of music, and there's all sorts of things that can happen for students. So here's how this works. Let's take, so I have pulled, this is straight from the Noteflight content library. I'm just going to make sure we're all tracking of what I'm doing because I know I'm moving a little fast. So I went to the Noteflight Learn content library. I went to this pop library, which has 894 pop songs available, 846, sorry, pop songs available from Hal Leonard. You have pop standard, rock, film, show tunes, country, children, worship, pop, Disney. So I pulled It's Quiet Uptown from the Hamilton mixtape. And again, you have Noteflight Learn. You have full access to this entire song directly from Hal Leonard, which is amazing. And now I found a YouTube video of the one and only Kelly Clarkson singing this live. So I'd like to sync this YouTube video to the score as an assignment. This is a great assignment to get students to understand timing and how this works. So let's do this. I'm in view only mode. Why am I in view only mode? Oh, because I have not checked it out. I was in view only mode because I need to create editable copies. So now I have my editable copy. You probably heard my dog bark. I think it's dinner time for her. So now in the score menu down here, there's this thing called Sync Audio. So when you select this, and I'm going to close out these menus, you add your audio source. So I just copy and pasted this YouTube video. It's going to pull it up in the corner. There's Kelly. And now let's sync this. Now, power tip for syncing. I'm actually going to take the piano part off so I can just see the notation. It's a little easier because really I can hear the vocal. It's a lot easier to sync. So quick power tip, right? Sometimes I'll sync in scroll view too, but for this purpose, we won't get that crazy. All right, so now you can click this measure button or you can press the M key on your keyboard. I strongly suggest the M key pressing option. So I'm going to hit play, and all you're going to do is tell Noteflight each measure. So you're going to tap the beginning of each measure, and you're going to set the timing, and you're going to teach Noteflight to follow the live recording. This is a wonderful assignment for students to listen to a recording, especially when the artist is moving. I love using live recordings for this and have them feel the timing and read the music in real time. Really, really fun assignment. So here we go. Second measure. So I messed up, no worry. I'm actually going to show you how to fix this because it's actually a really easy way to do it. I'm going to remove this sync. Notice that, and this happens sometimes, the YouTube video was only a 2-measure intro instead of a 4-measure intro. No problem at all. I'm going to sync it again. So I can edit the score. So ignore the cursor right now. So every time you sync a measure, it's trying to memorize the timing. And see, she has some. So I'm going to keep syncing this. One of the lessons I learned is, as a singer floats around the melody, it's teaching me and like students, like you have to listen to that accompaniment and really sync it up, right? And you can just go through this whole thing in real time. I'm gonna get to a cadence. Notice it's getting a little faster. Kelly takes me to church every time she sings. And we'll stop. So I'm going to hit done here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can hit done. It's just synced up to here. I won't go through the whole thing, but notice that was fun. Now, let me go back. I'll bring both parts back so we can see it all. Now, I can start at any measure. When I hit play, and we can go into the mixer real quick, and I'll show you what that looks like. When you go into the mixer, notice that YouTube shows up as its own part, right? So Noteflight's added this little YouTube thing, and the synced media shows up. I can minimize this, right, and just start right on measure 5, and look what happens. Now I'm looking at the music scroll, but I'm listening to Kelly.
Hey, John,
right?
Your sound's in your headphones.
Oh, that's right. You're not hearing my sound. Thanks for that. I need to click my loop back on. All right, so this is what it sounds. I've synced it up.
There are moments that the words don't reach.
And it's playing back directly synced with the score, right? So thanks for that. And I know you probably didn't hear me syncing it up, but we can follow along again. Now, what can we do with this, right? And the cool thing is, anywhere I start, it's lined up. The other thing that's really interesting here is that this could become a further assignment. The act of doing that is fun for students. What if I wanted to record along with this, right? Let's say I play trumpet, which I do. And what if I wanted to go, this is where it gets, let's put some stuff together that we've already done. I'm going to go in the parts panel and say, you know what? I want this voice part to be a trumpet part because I can't sing like Kelly Clarkson, but I might want to play trumpet. So now I'm going to the score panel. I'm going to come up here. So notice I have actually turned this in to a trumpet and piano version that's synced to a live recording of Kelly Clarkson singing this, right? Now you hear you don't want to hear the trumpet playback. So I'm going to turn this off so we only hear the YouTube playback. I did not call YouTube the YouTube. I'm not that old. Right? And I see this is here. So imagine now that I'm a student and I love this song and I want to play it on my alto sax, my bassoon, my whatever. And I'd love to do this. Now, this is a little low for trumpet, so I'm going to do what every trumpet player does in the world and take it up an octave, which is, of course. So now I can sit here and play along with Kelly Clarkson, right? So I can even start at this point. Now we can combine this idea of audio recording. So now let's say I want to audio record along with the YouTube video and play my little heart out. And let's just let this go and see what happens. And you're hearing this good. I started transposing.
I walk alone to the store in this quiet old town. I never liked the quiet before. Take the children to church on Sunday. Climb up across the floor and I play. That never used to happen before. Sitting in the street, walking by myself, talking to myself, happy. You knock me
So
out.
you could just play music, right? Think about all the musical skills that I just went through. I took a live recording, I felt it, I synced it up, I did transposition, I did recording, the whole thing. The other option to take this one step further, where all of this kind of collides, is that let's say I wanted to practice improvisation. Like, I want to learn to improvise, and I know this song, I hear it, it's a very simple chord progression. What if I took synced media and I decided to add a part, and I'll call it a trumpet part, it doesn't matter what it is, but I'm going to call it improv, right? And so now, what if I wanted to like play around with a descant, or like very real world, you're on a gig with Kelly Clarkson, my dream come true. And so I'll go into record, and I can again move this, that part name will change it. Yeah, if I move it, refresh the page. So now, what if I wanted to play along and record with myself and improvise with myself? So I started playing somewhere around here. I'm going to record to a blank staff, right? You don't have to have notes to record. You record just any staff you want. I want to hear the YouTube, and I'll hear my trumpet part, and I don't want to hear the improv part as I play. So you set up tracks. Again, this is some 201 advanced stuff, but students can do this. And now I can just have some fun and just doodle, and it's recording what I'm doodling. So I'll let this go just for a couple measures. I'm just doodling, right? And I love doing this for improv because this is actually recorded YouTube, but I'll have students go back and say, just listen to what you improved. Do you find an idea, a lick, 2 notes, 3 notes that you liked? Oh, you did? Notate it, right? And that's the game, right? To me, this is the most fun, engaging way to teach students like how to start safely playing around and doing some music and like having fun. But also getting into a vibe of like, I can improvise, I can try things, I can just record myself playing around. If I don't like it, delete it. If I like it, I can notate it. And what happens is eventually they notate their own descant, and they learn to make up descants. So you could use this with content, you can use this with media sync. It's a great technique. So syncing media, the pop songs, you could probably find a performance of any of them on YouTube, but you could take the Hal Leonard score play recordings for the concert band works. They could literally work on syncing up the actual like performance demonstration track of the publisher's, concert band to the concert band, the choir, all kinds of cool stuff here. So that is media sync in the Noteflight editor. Now let's talk about student assessments. When it comes to student assessments, let's talk about using colors, text, comments, and audio recording. So when students complete something in Noteflight Learn, right, there's lots of ways you can give students feedback. And so to start, what I'm going to do is show you an example of what it looks like for a teacher who's looking at a student's work and wants to give them some feedback. So I'm actually going to pull up from earlier. I showed you that activity template feature. And let me pull this here. Oh, I made changes earlier. So I'm going to go and say, all right, let me find a student who did a thing. Sydney. It's been a while since I looked at Sydney. So let's say I want to give student feedback. Now, looks like I already have shown a couple things. So I'm going to delete this so I can show you how this works again. First thing I like to talk about is colors. The color palette in Noteflight Learn is a really great way to identify sections of music. So if you want to call out a measure, you can make it blue, right? You can have a color coding system. If this is a composition, this could be there's passing tones, color passing tones blue, color roots of chords green. You could, there's lots of research about red being upsetting, but you can color things that are wrong red, whatever you want to do, right? The other option is when you're commenting on a student's score, you can use, and my face is in the way, the comments panel. So a lot of times if I want to I'll color something red and I'll do like this, red, something about what they did. And I think of anything fancy, but that's a comment about the red notes. So colors are a great way to codify. The other thing you can do is put in red equals wrong. You could create a codified example here in the comments, and that way students know what that means. Totally up to you, right? Text. In the text, there's several different types of text. The one that you'll find the most useful is this idea of just performance text, because that's kind of the most common. And T is the shortcut, T for text. So you could just hit T and type a word. So if you want to do a quick thing, and this is move aroundable, it can be moved aroundable, and notice you can position it differently. So you might type something right on here for students. That's another way to provide feedback. Let's say you want to give them some feedback, but you don't want a lot of words on the score. That's when this annotation comes in. So I'm going to select this note again. In text, you can hit annotation. And now you can type all sorts of things. And you have a little freeform text box, and you can go and go and go. Notice it'll scroll, and it's there. So now there's this little hey, there's an annotation here. And that's all the information, and it shows who gave the information at what time. You could also have multiple students give annotations, and you can see who gave it at what time. So you have lots of text options. The other thing I'll show you is this idea of prompt, right? You can show a prompt, which is instructions for the beginning of a score. You could also, you have text blocks before or after a system. So if you want to say something before the system, I can do text blocks before system, and this gives me a block to type lots, and you can type lots of words. The other thing here is that this block auto formats, so you can even make a number list. How many things did you get wrong? Let me count the rates. Well, 1, you did this. 2, you didn't do this. Maybe it could be positive too. 3, we did this. You can create this numbered list, and I'll just keep going a little bit. And notice Noteflight will format around it. So you have a text block, and Noteflight will automatically format everything, right? The last thing I'll share is that if you'd like to audio record feedback to a student, remember, you could totally use that recording feature we just talked about. So you could record right to the student staff if it's a composition thing, or you could go in and give a quick part. Doesn't matter the instrument you pick. You could call this feedback, right? Create a quick feedback part. And essentially, you have a feedback line. You go into record mode. And here's another power tip. By default, record mode does not let you hear what the student did. But you can, of course, go in and say, you know what? I want to hear the students playing while they play back. And you just hit record, and you can just start talking. And you just have a blank track of talking, but it's cool. So I don't know what this demo audio is, so we're going to have an adventure on this. So let me show how this works. I've selected this, and I'm going to be like a judge's tape, right? Wow, that's great. Wow, that's John. That's my voice as demoing this before, which is awesome. The irony of me already having demoed voice comments on this score is incredible. Now, the thing I wanted to show you is, remember the parts panel where you can hide this? Well, guess what? Just hide it. Now the student sees their part, but they can hear the teacher talking right over it. So now you've created the ability to talk directly to your students and give them feedback, especially if they're practicing for solo and ensemble, and that idea of a judge talking over your performance. You can create that entire experience, right? So just pointing out that that's a really cool option. All right, so that is giving student feedback with colors, text, comments, and audio recording. Let's talk about creating worksheets. Now, in Noteflight Learn, this is actually just a quick demo of my favorite support articles. So in support.noteflight.com, there's this using Noteflight Learn section. This making worksheets article, I feel like should be bold and 10 font sizes bigger. Most of what I just showed, so this brings together all the pieces that we've been talking about into one article. This is I would bookmark this. So it shows all the different text options that I just went through and gives you little ideas. Every idea is linked to the user guide so you can learn how to do it. On top of that, every section has an embedded score that shows all the examples. So this making worksheets article is really, really, really helpful. And then how to create systems. When you're making worksheets, you end up wanting to manipulate the notation in ways that make it more logical for students to complete. So you might want to, for example, restart measure numbers. So each system shows as measure 1. Right? Things like cautionary key signatures, final bar lines in every section, locking the systems, and there's all sorts of things. You can adjust spacing. So again, there's instructions for how to do that. Color, we've talked about colors already. And then all this idea of using playback, recording, using media sync. So this is a really cool opportunity to talk about making worksheets. The other thing I'll show you in Noteflight as a quick power tip, because we have a couple minutes and we're going to end right on time. I'll go back to my 101 score that we used earlier, is when we're looking at making worksheets, the other thing I'll share is that you can format these to look like we talked about formatting in page view, but in page setup, you can also do a custom page size. So it's, right now it's 8.5 wide by 11 tall, but you can actually make it shorter or less. So you don't have all this empty space at the bottom, or, a worksheet doesn't have to have a second, but if you're not going to print it and it's just a digital thing, you can make the height longer so the students just see everything on one sort of scrolling page view. And, you don't need pagination. So just be okay with thinking outside of the 8.5 by 11 page. Unless you're printing this on paper, you should really think about the way you size things, because Chromebooks are wider than they are taller, right? iPads, whatever your device is. So creating worksheets that are framed for your student's device will make it a lot better for them in that long run. So that's some tips on creating worksheets in Noteflight Learn. Now, let's talk about a couple of more power SoundCheck features. Performance assessment SoundCheck, creating SoundCheck scores. Now, we talked before, we opened up SoundCheck directly from the content library score, but I'll also note that anything you create in Noteflight can be used in SoundCheck. This is where SoundCheck has an advantage over everyone else, because you have a full notation editor with Noteflight. Oh, we're in 201 now, ta-da. Full notation editor with Noteflight. You can compose, you can import music XML, you can import MIDI, but you're importing it into notation, so you can clean it up and make it exactly how you want. We've talked about formatting. You can make the parts formatted, you get everything perfect. When you're ready to create a SoundCheck file, you hit Create SoundCheck, you have these settings you want. And by the way, you or your students can create SoundCheck from a Noteflight score. And you just hit Create, and Noteflight is going to render a SoundCheck score from your Noteflight score. The notation, the part formatting, and the playback audio will all be exactly what you see in Noteflight. So from Noteflight to SoundCheck, there is 100% accurate conversion, and you are getting your own performance assessment directly from what you did. And that's a really, really awesome opportunity to show. Now, look how fast that happened, right? We already have it, and there it is. Everything's there. Your parts are there. Now, the other thing is, notice up here in the corner, this says SoundCheck version of. So we fully recognize that you've created this SoundCheck performance assessment score, but maybe you say, oh, this is cool, but oops, I want to change up something, or oh, I want to do it in C major. Every SoundCheck score gives you a direct link to the Noteflight score from which it was created. So I can click here, go back to the original Noteflight score so you don't have to go searching for it. And let's say I meant to do this with concert pitch off, or let's say I want to take the whole thing down an octave. Okay, I've made some edits. You know what you can do? You can just create another SoundCheck score. And you can keep doing that into your heart's content. You can create a SoundCheck, make a variation, create more. And remember, if I want to now assign this to students, I can create activity template, locked or unlocked mode. I can change the settings. When you create SoundCheck, it lets you create a SoundCheck score for yourself with a score goal, difficulty level, and number of attempts. When you go to assign it to your students, you can change those settings. One power tip: don't limit yourself to one attempt, because as an educator, I always want to experience what my students experience. So I'll practice things, right? If you limit yourself to one attempt, you're going to lock yourself out of your own score. You can limit the students, but keep yourself unlimited. So you might practice SoundCheck, get a sense for how it works. Say, you know what? I'd like to try this at the hard level. Okay. You can experience it. You can set all the settings, and then you can go, great. Time to give this to students. I've got it the way I want it. Locked mode, hard, 2 attempts, all site members, bam. There's your link. Send it to the students. They each get their copy. The last power tip I'll tell you is that students can create activity templates for other students, which is really cool, which leads us to our next point, which is creating SoundCheck for composition and performance assessment, right? You can actually create assignments that have students compose and performance assess. So I showed some different examples earlier, but imagine that you create an assignment that has the students, where'd my original go? I'll go back. Let's say that this becomes an assignment where you are telling students to compose 4 more measures, right? And you can set all this up. Let me just select all these measures. So you could do something where the student could take this, right? Add 4 more measures. I know I did that quickly. I used a shortcut. Don't tell anybody. I just hit R and repeated a bunch of stuff. And now I'm going to delete these. Kind of a quick way of adding measures. I can just select all these and hit R and add 4 more measures and break it. So now this could be compose 8 more measures, finish this theme, right? Students compose away. The student goes in. The student creates SoundCheck. The student assigns SoundCheck as an activity template to other students. And now you've created this beautiful chain of students engaging other students with music. The students can go back and give comments. All the things we've shown tonight are available for both teachers and students to use, which is really, really valuable. 2 more quick tips, and then we'll go. We'll just go a couple minutes over because I'm on a roll and I'm almost done. I want to talk about using content for creating orchestration assignments, right? Now, remember, a lot of apps were used to getting content that's static. What you get is what you get, and don't fuss a bit. That's not how Noteflight works. Everything can be edited in Noteflight. So here's some fun ideas of using content libraries to immediately create orchestration assignments. So let's say I want to find something in the orchestra library, and I'd like to make it I'm going to open up an orchestra, Allegro in G, looks like a tricky one. And the assignment now is to use this create editable copy option. So I'm going to make a Noteflight score out of this. Now, what if I want to make this a concert band? Right? So now I can go in, I'll get myself out of the way, and the student can go in and say, you know what, I need to make this in a key that concert band players can play, because that's way too many hashtags for brass players. So you could change the key. You could go in and say violin 1. What would play violin? Well, maybe I'll make that a flute part, right? I'll type flute, I'm orchestrating this piece. This is a really, really great way of teaching students how different instruments function. So I like to use the orchestrative band because we talk about like all the different colors of a concert band, right, of a wind ensemble. But we also get into, well, we don't need bowings. We got to get rid of those. But what else do string players not have to do? Breathe. So now we have to say, well, we're going to have to maybe slow this down, build in some breath marks, layer things out. This is a wonderful orchestration assignment. Your students could reorchestrate this. Choral SATB is absolutely amazing to make a quartet out of anything. Grab one of those choral 4-part SATB or 2-part SABs. You have 2 high lines and a bass line. It could be any combination of instruments, right? So a lot of times students have like friend groups they want to play with. This is a really great way to get students composing and arranging because you don't have to input all these notes or come up with some, creative way of arranging something. You could literally just pull up an existing piece and talk about timbre, color, tessitura, range, expressive elements, and that's another thing too. They can go in and change the dynamics. So when you look at this content, think about how could I reorchestrate that for something else? Okay, last power tip of the night, adapting for composition assignments, right? We talked about orchestration, but the other thing that's really interesting, I'm pulling this up as we talk, is how can we use existing content to get students to compose. A lot of times we're teaching composition. We kind of do this like, here's a blank piece of paper, draw something, or we create these like very short things. But remember, you have thousands of pieces of music in these content libraries ready to go. So essential elements methods, even if you're not a band or string, beginning method, you have 1,200 8 to 16 to 24 measure pieces that can be short melodies that can be harmonized, have accompaniments written for them, that can have a B section or ABA prime. These are just like great for pulling up an essential elements beginning, whatever. There's basic melodies in here, and this becomes an orchestration assignment or a play along. So that's a really great way to do it. I'll show you 2 more examples of how to create content. The other I like to do is go into the content library. There's a lot of great easy piano and educational piano in here. If you don't have a piano, class, remember a lot of these easy piano or piano solo things from Hal Leonard, chords in the left, melody on the right. Ooh, Blue King Crab. That looks fun. So now this is a little back and forth. I'm going to pick another example. So you can find something that's piano solo, and I'm going to find piano solo, and I'm going to go for like a level 3. I'm just filtering down. So, oops, I think I clicked on level 1. So let me get rid of that. Filter away. So let me pull this old lang syne again. This is actually a great example. So notice we have a nice left-hand melody, left-hand chordal structure, and we have a right-hand single melody. Now, how easy is it to have students learn to compose? So I'm going to call this Make a Melody, right? And I'm not going to let them know that it's auld lang syne. I'm going to trick them, right? So then I'm going to go and highlight all of this, and I'm going to go in and actually, if I highlight the whole thing, I'll move it. I'm just going to delete all this. Now, I'm just deleting measures here, deleting all the melody. So what have I created? I've created the ability, and I'll just do this from the beginning because I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to show here. So let me just break this up so you can only see what I want to show so it's a little easier. Now I've created a play along. Students have a nice, simple harmonic structure to add a melody, right? You have so many options. So you have a nice, simple thing, and it's fun to introduce these types of songs. They can do it. See, now I can show you the real one. You could let students compose. You could also do the inverse, right? You could take the melody and delete the bass line, and then they have to do a bass clef harmony. So taking these easy piano things and creating composition assignments are so simple. the last thing I'll show is my favorite things to do is these pop libraries. Again, they're all piano, vocal, guitar. So anything you want to do, if you want to take a song, and I'm just going to pull up anything. Randy Newman. I have a really funny Randy Newman story when I was subbing on an orchestra gig. I won't tell it. Now check it out. So I can do the same thing here, right? I can just take, I got to create a double copy. I can take the melody out, and now if I'm learning to improvise, I can actually now have a piano play along. Yep, and it warns me that multi-measure rests are off. So I'm actually taking these off, and this could be a compose a melody, or it could be another improv thing, right? I could just hit record and hit play and just play around, right? So you have these pop libraries, you have 800 like nice, easy chord structures, piano that you can use. So feel free to think outside of the box. This is notation, this is composition, this is performance assessment, and you could do all these things isolated, but you could do them all together, which I think is really, really exciting as well. So thank you for hanging on for 7 extra minutes for those who did. Thank you for allowing us to fly through 2 hours of Noteflight 101 and 201. Again, I could go for 16 more hours, but I'm not. But I really appreciate you all. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. You can tell how enthusiastic we are about this product, and how, if you keep going with it and keep going with it, all of a sudden you unlock like expert level things where students are just going through multiple musical skills and using all these tools together. So I would encourage you to continue to push yourself, continue to give your students the freedom to push themselves, because a lot of the things I showed tonight, I didn't figure them out. Other educators didn't figure them out. Students showed them to me. And it's incredible to learn. So push yourself, have fun, make great music, and thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful night, and summer's almost here. Thank you so much.